Hey friends, Canon's just released the brand new 85mm f1.4L IS. I'm really excited to talk about it with you. So getting the obvious out of the way, it is an EF mount f1.4 L series weather sealed 4-stop image stabilized lens, very much styled after like the 35 f2 f1.4 Mark II, pardon me. So it's it's kind of the modern version of Canon. It's Canon starting to say, ooh, we have new design aesthetic. Ooh, we're gonna value new things. And so, these lenses look a lot like Sigma's lenses because there's only so different lenses that have ultimately very similar optical design can have, I guess, but they look good. They're not incredibly attractive, and well, so it's nice to see Canon kind of, deciding a new direction to go with their lens design. It feels like with those primes, they've kind of stuck to an older pattern. The 50 f1.2, the 85 f1.2 really aren't very good looking lenses. They're just big and heavy, and the new ones, the 35 f1.42 and now the 85 f1.4 LIS, look much more like real lenses, if that makes any sense. The other great thing about this, by comparison to the f1.2 version, is that not only does it have stabilization, but it has full-time ring type USM, manual focus override. So what that means is that you can actually turn that thing and it'll turn the focusing elements, and you have a distance meter, whereas on the f1.2L version, it's electronically coupled, so you have to press your shutter button in order to send power to the lens so that you can manually focus it, because it is a focus by wire system. You're getting 9 rounded aperture blades, which means that your bokeh should look fantastic. You're going to get one spherical element, and every single optical element in this lens is coated with Canon's air sphere and fluorine coatings, which means that, flaring, ghosting, all sorts of chromatic and light-oriented aberrations should be gone. This should be a very, very fine optical lens. You won't have to deal with applying in camera or in post lens corrections for those sorts of things. Finally, it's got 14 elements in 10 groups. So while that doesn't, that's a great little spec sheet there, Joshy. What does it mean? Where are we going with this? Well, it's interesting because at $1,600, this lens is very much priced between the f1.8 version that they have, this guy, and the f1.2. It's not trying to replace the f1.2, although I think that I would call it a very good replacement. It's meant to kind of knock Sigma's 85 out of the park. It's meant to be a good comparison in terms of optical quality, like sharpness, how many megapixels can it resolve, with the G Master and the Sigma. It's supposed to keep people within Canon system that are wanting an 85mm. They can go with the native, EF mount that they couldn't before because of the price of the f1.2. It's given them stabilization, which is something that no other 85mm lens does. So, I think this is geared at a lot of different people, and because of that, I think they really kind of screwed the pooch on the price point. At $1,600, this is a lens that specialists will buy. This isn't a lens that hobbyists will buy. This is a lens that hobbyists will buy. The f1.8 at $430 makes a hell of a lot more sense than the $1,600 f1.4 LIS or the f1.2L that comes in closer to like $3,000. Or, sorry, comes closer to $2,000. I always get that messed up. Anyway, like, if this f1.4 were priced closer to the Sigma, I know the Sony is still exorbitant. The Sony is still closer to something like 2Gs, but the Sony and the Canon are in this running that is not actually the case, right? You want to put that price point lower down, call it $1,200 or $1,300 so that you'll attract, from a price point perspective, the same people that the Sigma 85 f1.4 will attract, because no one's going to pay $500 so they don't have to carry around a lens, that much bigger of a lens in terms of the Sigma 85, when they're looking at the Sigma in the first place because of it being cheaper. The IS is a huge deal for this focal length. I don't think there's another lens that has IS at this focal length, another prime that has IS at this focal length. So that's a really big deal. If they could really undercut a lot of the market, Canon could, of 85s if they dropped that price point down. If they made a better, good, better, best model, right? Good being this. DP Review uses this lens to test every camera that comes through their doors, every Canon camera that comes through their doors, or full frame Canon camera. Wow, that's a lot of qualifiers. The f1.4 should be, in my opinion, like $1,300. And then you step up to the 2000 with the f1.2. So there's a very like linear growth model there. And you got to put the f1.4 at, you know, not just square between, because it has IS, because it is f1.4, because the rest of the competition has it at a $1,100 or whatever price point, right? So, you know, I think Canon's not paying as much as Canon is paying attention. Like, this lens with IS, big deal. They're obviously paying attention to Sigma coming out with the 85, coming out with the 35. They've updated both of those lenses. They have not updated the 50s. The 50s need updating. That's also a very popular focal length, but apparently the 35 and 85 are more important to Canon. So Canon is paying attention. What they're not paying attention to is why consumers are buying. They're not only buying for the incredible sharpness, they're also buying for the price point. And with the cost of everything going up, like, Canon has been very intentional about trying to automate as much of the lens production process as possible. The 16-35 f2.8 Mark III, that lens is predominantly made by machines. There are a couple of elements that can't be. They're still too fine to be able to be worked by a machine. You need to manipulate them in such a well-attuned manner that they really only trust people that have been working with Canon, making lenses for a very long time to make those. But the point is, like, I'm imagining, in my own head at any rate, that if at all possible, Canon is going to be making this lens with as much automation as possible, with as little human effort as possible. And what that means, because that's the direction that Canon's going, that's the direction they've said they're going, what that means to me is that this lens costs a hell of a lot less to make than the markup would tell you it does, right? So if we're going to just assume if we're just going to assume that Canon, marks everything up by 100%, costs $800 to make this lens, or 200%. Costs, thought experiment here, or just work with me. It costs $800 to make this lens for a $1,600 lens. If they instead of going to that 200% markup, they'd gone to like 150, 1200, or 175 with like 1300, 1350, 1400, they could have gone a lot further in speaking to the price point that is appealing about the quality that you're getting out of Sigma lenses. People are buying the Sony G Master 85 f1.4 because it's a lot harder to adapt to that body, to that type of mirrorless body, to Sony mirrorless bodies, than it is to adapt an EF to an EF. Like, Sigma to Canon works just fine. Nikon doesn't have an 85 that really competes on this way. They have the 105, which is fantastic. But, you gotta pay attention to the rest of the market, Canon. You can't just say this is what we're going to do, because that, by only paying attention to what you want to do as a brand, by not listening to what the market is doing, by competing with yourself instead of the market, that's not the way to build and grow. There will be a lot of people who buy this lens right out the gate. There will be a lot of Canon shooters that have the 1.2 that are like, I never use this at 1.2 anyway because it sucks at 1.2. So I'm going to go with the 1.4 because I could really use the stabilization, and it's probably going to be way better optically. Because in terms of the optics, Canon's paying attention to the competition. But it's not going to have the appeal that something like this is going to have. And I'm not asking Canon to give that lens the same kind of mass market appeal that this does. Like, this is just because it's $430, right? But if it were within the realm of possible for more photographers, if better features in Canon's cameras were more accessible to more photographers, then Canon would be in a much better place. Anyway, rant over. Thanks very much for your time and for your attention. See you in the next one.